Sometimes the clock doesn't just tick. It warns. Sometimes the silence in a room isn't empty. It's filled with whispers from a fate already written. And sometimes the universe doesn't ask. It declares. Your time is finally up. Not a threat. Not a guess. A divine message locked into a specific day, April 29th. What if your entire life was building up to this one date? What if your prayers, your pain, your patience were all being tallied in silence until now? This story isn't fiction. It's a mirror. And when you stare into it, be ready. Because April 29th might just be your date too. It began with a whisper. Not outside, but within. Miriam had always felt like time wasn't hers. That she was a guest in her own life, serving others, pleasing everyone, always last in her own queue of needs. She lived in a modest apartment in Lahore with her aging mother, worked 2 jobs, and had learned to carry invisible scars without complaint. The kind of woman who smiled through betrayal, stayed quiet when slandered, and kept giving when she was already empty. Everyone told her, "Your time will come, just wait." But she had waited long enough. One evening, after another long shift at the school, Miriam sat alone in her dimly lit room, staring at the calendar on her wall. April was approaching. Something about the number 29 seemed to pulse. Not blink, pulse, like it was alive, like it was staring back at her. Then the dreams began. Every night, she'd hear the same thing. Your time is up on the 29th. Not in a fearful way, but not peaceful either. Just final. At first, she brushed it off. Overwork, fatigue. But the dreams didn't stop. In fact, they got clearer. She saw herself walking barefoot in an empty alley. The sky overhead was purple, and in front of her stood a massive gate, rusted, locked, and ancient. A voice echoed behind her. Turn around. The key isn't ahead. It's behind you. But every time she turned, the dream ended. By mid-April, she couldn't ignore it anymore. There was no peace in her soul. Something was coming. And it wasn't death. It wasn't tragedy. It was change. Heavy, divine, unavoidable. The world around her hadn't changed, but her perception of it had. She began noticing signs. The people who once mocked her struggles started avoiding her eyes. The relatives who used to belittle her for not being married at 33 were suddenly quiet. They no longer asked Beta Koi Rishta, because deep inside, something in Miriam had shifted. She was no longer chasing what they thought she should become. Even her boss, a ruthless principal who thrived on humiliating staff, suddenly stopped snapping at her. One afternoon, she even said, "Take tomorrow off, Miriam. You look different." Different. That word echoed in her mind like a siren, because that's what she felt like, a stranger in her own skin. On the 20th of April, while preparing iftar for her mother, Miriam heard a knock at the door. Standing outside was a man she hadn't seen in 12 years, her cousin Zubair. Zubair, the one who had promised her marriage and vanished the moment her father passed away. Zubair, the one who had left her shattered at 21, made her feel like damaged goods and never looked back. Now he stood at her doorstep with lowered eyes. I heard about your mother's illness," he said. "And I don't know, but I kept dreaming about you. And a gate. Does that make sense?" Miriam froze. That gate. The same gate. They stared at each other in silence, both realizing this wasn't a coincidence. He left shortly after, saying nothing more, just that he needed to say sorry, truly sorry, for what he had done. That night, Miriam cried. Not tears of pain, but release, as if a burden had lifted, a karmic knot had untied. She knew then, the gate wasn't a symbol of death. It was a symbol of freedom. On the 25th of April, her mother, bedridden for months, stood up on her own, walked to the balcony, smiled. "Your father visited me in a dream last night," her mother said. "He said he's proud of you, that the chains are breaking." Miriam didn't understand. Chains? Whose chains? But on the morning of the 28th, everything made sense. Her phone rang. A known number. "Are you Miriam Khan?" the voice asked. "Yes," she replied cautiously. "You applied for the International Teaching Fellowship 2 years ago, correct? Her heart skipped. That application was a shot in the dark, forgotten and buried. Well, congratulations. You've been selected. It's a 2-year position in Istanbul. Your documents have been cleared, and your departure is scheduled for... The woman paused. April 29th. Miriam's breath caught in her throat. The gate, the countdown, the change. It was all true. She dropped the phone. The room around her felt like it was glowing. The same way you feel when you finally exhale after holding your breath for years. But more signs were coming. That night, she had one last dream. The alley again, the purple sky. But this time, she wasn't walking alone. Behind her were all the versions of her. Young, naive Miriam, broken-hearted Miriam, exhausted caretaker Miriam, silent suffering Miriam, all walking toward the gate. When they reached it, it opened. No locks, no rust, just light. And as she walked through it, a final whisper echoed behind her. Your time is finally up for suffering. Now rise. Miriam's story isn't a fantasy. It's a reminder that sometimes God delays not to punish, but to prepare. When your time comes, the same people who once buried you with words will stand back, speechless. The same life that once mocked you will open its gates and bow. And when it happens, it'll happen like this, without chaos, without noise. Just a quiet date, marked by the divine, April 29th. But her story doesn't end here. Because when the gate opens, new choices, new shadows, and new tests await. What lies beyond it? The morning of April 29th arrived not with thunder, not with fireworks, just a quiet glow seeping through Miriam's curtain, as if the sun knew it was no ordinary day. She woke up before far, not from the alarm, but from peace. The kind of peace you only feel after storms have passed, and your soul is no longer a battlefield. She looked around her tiny room one last time. The prayer mat in the corner, her mother's faded wedding photo, the books on her shelf. Silent witnesses of every silent tear she had ever shed. And now, they would stay behind, like pieces of a chapter finally finished. Her flight was at 2:30 p.m. But the journey, the real one, had already begun. Her mother hugged her tightly at the gate. "Go write your name into the sky," she whispered. "You already carved it into my heart." Miriam smiled, the kind of smile that carried grief, healing, and gratitude all at once. But what she didn't know was that while she was packing her suitcase, someone else was unpacking guilt. Zubair, he had returned to the city the night before and hadn't slept. His mind was racing. The gate from his dreams. Miriam's face. The 29th. It all aligned too perfectly to ignore. He hadn't just wronged her years ago. He had shattered a divine soul for the sake of societal pressure. And now, something within him wouldn't let him rest. He drove to the airport. He didn't know what he was going to say, or whether she'd even want to see him. But some things must be faced before they haunt you forever. Meanwhile, as Miriam sat at the departure gate, her phone buzzed. It was an anonymous text. "You're walking into greatness, but greatness always tests loyalty. Be ready. 29. She froze. No name, no number, just that cryptic message. Her pulse quickened, not from fear, but awareness. Sometimes when you step into the light, shadows start following you, not to scare you, but to see if you're strong enough to walk forward without looking back. The flight to Istanbul was smooth, almost eerily so. She kept glancing at the clouds, waiting for some aha moment, some thunderous realization. But there wasn't one, because when your time arrives, the world doesn't shout. It aligns. When she landed, a sleek black car was waiting for her at the terminal. A woman stepped out, tall, poised, and dressed in a flowing beige hijab. "You must be Miriam," she said, smiling. "We've been expecting you." Istanbul, the city of secrets and souls. The organization that had selected Miriam wasn't just any teaching foundation. It was a trust known only by initials, RIF, Rama International Foundation. It operated quietly across borders, uplifting educators, healers, and change makers, those who've been forged in hardship and still chose to rise. Their mission wasn't just to teach, but to awaken. And Miriam was one of the chosen. For the next 3 months, her days were filled with intense training, not just in education, but in self-discipline, endurance, and emotional mastery. She learned to command rooms, speak in multiple languages, and connect with people across cultures. Every time she thought she'd reached her limit, her mentors would simply say, "You were born in fire. This is just a flame asking if you still remember." But not everything was smooth. One night, as she returned to her quarters, she noticed an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a photo of her from years ago, young, broken, standing alone at her father's funeral. On the back of it was written, "They thought you'd stay broken, but the fire always remembers who it belongs to." 29. The messages wouldn't stop. Another time, a child she was teaching pointed at her and said, "My grandmother says you carry a light, but the light must stay clean. Beware of those with honeyed voices." The next day, she received an email from Zubair, a confession. He admitted to not just ghosting her, but actively spreading rumors after their broken engagement to protect his image in the family. He said the shame had eaten him alive over the years. He had tried to forget, but ever since the night of the 20th, dreams wouldn't let him sleep. He ended the email with, "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but if your gate opened because of Allah's mercy, I beg that mercy to shine just once on me too." Miriam didn't reply, not out of anger, but because some doors don't close with words, they close with silence. The test comes in disguise. It was the 29th of June, exactly 2 months since she had left home. She was invited to speak at an elite seminar for leaders and scholars. It was the kind of event where reputations are made or broken. She was the youngest on the panel. As she stepped onto the stage, lights blinding her, she paused. The gate, the voice, the countdown, all of it had led here. She closed her eyes and whispered under her breath, "Ya Allah, if this is the path you wrote for me, make me worthy of it." Her speech was not rehearsed. It flowed from somewhere deeper than intellect. She spoke of women who are shamed for staying single, daughters who carry whole households on their shoulders, people who keep showing up even when the world forgets them. She ended with a simple line, "Your time isn't late. It's divine. And when it arrives, not even the sky can deny you." The room was silent. Then a standing ovation. But here's the twist. Later that night, while scrolling through messages, she received one more, a short voice note. No ID, no name, just a soft male voice, one she couldn't quite place, whispering, "Miriam, April 29th was never the end. It was your beginning. But beginnings have enemies. Be ready. They're coming." She stared at her screen. Enemies? Who? Why? That night, she dreamed again. But this time, she wasn't in the alley. She was in a circle of fire. Each flame whispered a name. People she had trusted, helped, even forgiven. And in the center of the circle stood a figure in white, face hidden, pointing at her. Your rise will scare those who fed on your silence. They'll try to pull you back. Not because you're wrong, but because they can no longer control the version of you that finally said, "Enough." Miriam's time did come on April 29th. But it wasn't a destination. It was an awakening. She didn't win a lottery. She didn't marry a prince. She didn't stumble into luck. She became the gate, a symbol that when you are patient in pain, honest in chaos, and loyal in silence, God himself writes your timeline. And when your time arrives, the same world that ignored you will watch you lead. So if you're still waiting, still doubting, still wondering if your time will ever come, look at the calendar. Look at your scars. And remember, your time is written. And maybe, just maybe, it's on the next 29th. Because the gates, they don't open with keys. They open when your soul finally says, "I'm ready."